I am dedicated to fixing this 2015 Subaru STI. In fact, I've already done it once. When I first got this thing, we had a really bad case of rod knock. So we rebuilt the engine, rebuilt the turbo, and we even did some upgrades along the way, like a cylinder 4 cooling mod, an IAG AOS, and since we already had an exhaust and a hot air intake, I went ahead and got us an access port and a tune. So then you may be asking yourself, if I've already rebuilt this engine once, why is it all torn apart and on this table? Well, it's because after driving it for 200 miles, I had a full quart of coolant in the oil. So in the last episode, we dove headfirst into trying to diagnose what the issue was. We tested for a bad head gasket with a liquid tester and a cylinder leak down test. Both of those turned out A+, zero issue at all. I tore apart the turbo looking for cracks in the center housing to no avail. I double checked my IAG AOS hose routing and tried to test that for cracks. I even took off the oil cooler on the bottom of the engine. Here's one coolant line coming off. Oh, Jesus. Oh, gee. And I couldn't see any issues with that either. Since I could not find the issue, I went ahead, pulled the engine, tore it all the way down again to see if I did something wrong with the engine assembly. And unfortunately, out of everything I did in the last video, I couldn't find the issue. The O-rings and the gasket seemed to be there in the case halves, sealing that properly, and I couldn't see any issues with the head gasket as well. And of course, I spent hours with the borescope checking the block and the heads for cracks, and I couldn't see any cracks there either. Needless to say, the last Subaru video was super disappointing, a lot of work, finding zero results. But that's where this video comes in. We have 5 steps that we're gonna take, and one of those 5 steps is gonna fix our problem. Hopefully, because if not, I literally have no idea what the issue could be. Step 1, rebuild the engine. Obviously, we have to do this step. If we do step 1 and there's no coolant leaks, we know I did something wrong in my first engine build that caused the coolant leak. If step 1 does not fix the coolant leak, step 2, replace our turbo. It's possible that our center housing in our turbo has a crack in it, and that's where the coolant is getting into the oil. If step 2 does not fix the coolant leak, then we know it wasn't the engine build, and we know that the turbo wasn't the problem, which would lead us to step 3. Remove the IAG AOS from the coolant system. It is possible that even though the IAG AOS is brand new, that maybe there's a crack in it. If step 3 doesn't fix it, step 4, replace the oil cooler. The oil cooler is actually brand new OEM, so it's unlikely that that has a crack in it, but it's possible. If we do step 4 and it does not fix our coolant leak, step 5, pull the engine again and replace our heads. Step 5 is kind of what I think is the issue. Step 5 of pulling the engine and replacing the heads, if that does fix the issue, it would mean that we had a crack in our head. Lord have mercy, if I go through these 5 steps and we still have a coolant leak, it probably means there's a crack in the block. It should be really unlikely because the engine block only has 8,000 miles on it. So now you know the game plan. Now you know the 5-step process in fixing this coolant leak. Now you might be saying, why not just do step 5 at the same time as step 1? This way, if we do step 1 separate of step 5, we'll know if it's my engine rebuild that was the issue or a cracked head. So I'm doing this to solve all of our curiosities. So enough dilly-dally, let's get to work. I'm probably going to say this a couple times this episode, but I go way more in depth on how to build this engine in a previous episode. So if you're looking for an in-depth tutorial, I'll link to that video in the description. The worst part of engine assembly is cleaning everything, especially aluminum. It's super soft, so you have to be gentle or you'll score and gouge the metal and it won't seal properly. I like to clean aluminum with a razor blade to get major chunks of RTV off, then use a soft plastic drill brush and a carbide scraper to get it smooth. And of course, compressed air, brake clean, and a lint-free towel for the last wipe down. Something new I'm trying here is honing my own cylinders. Usually I let the machine shop do this, but it's only been 500 miles, so I see no harm in doing it myself this time. Now we can get ready to make these case halves together. Once you have everything you need ready to go, we can clean one last time, get the main bearings in place and lubed up, then set the 4 O-rings into position. Then we can do the fun part, RTV. RTV goes around the entire top section, the bottom corners, and around all 10 bolt holes in the middle. While I get this RTV spread out, let me tell you how I know how to put this engine together. It's because I'm following the factory service manual. The factory service manual has step-by-step instructions on every single thing that needs to be done. It's got torque specs, torque patterns, where to put RTV, when to lube bolt threads, when to use sealant, all with diagrams and pictures along the way. And because of today's sponsor, eManual Online, you can get the factory service manual for your vehicle 22% off. All you have to do is use the link in the description or scan the QR code and use discount code ShawnzeyRacing22 at checkout. So go show some love to eManual Online for the discount code and for helping us keep these cars out of the scrapyard. Once you finish up the RTV job, you can lower the crankshaft with the rods already assembled onto the prepped case half, and then lower the other half on top, making sure to seat it in the dowels. Then we can torque them together with long bolts with sealing washers in the middle and the shorter bolts all the way around the edge. Then install the rear main seal. I'm going to be using a lot of Company 23 tools this build, not sponsored, but I highly recommend them because they make everything a lot easier. Now for what I think is the hardest part of this engine build, installing the pistons into the block and getting them attached to the rods. This is my second reminder to go check out my in-depth engine build video because I go over this entire process in a lot more detail with some super helpful visual aids. Make sure you lube up the cylinder walls, the pistons, and the wrist pins too. You want everything well lubricated for the first start. Now we can seal up the block with some plugs with thread sealant, a triangle piece with an O-ring, and a plate with RTV. 2 plugs on the front, 1 plug on the back, triangle with an O-ring on the left, and the plate with RTV on the right. Now we're ready to get this engine on the engine stand instead of this table. First, I like to torque down the flywheel so I don't have to do it later when it's dangling from the engine hoist. I'd do the clutch and pressure plate now too, but they don't fit on the engine stand. Onto the bottom of the engine, we can install the oil baffle, oil pickup, and the oil pan. Lots of little bolts here, so do not drop them into the engine. Then the oil cooler and the hose that goes to the block. On the front of the engine, we install the oil pump with RTV, Loctite, an O-ring, and lube up everything very nicely. To the right is the water pump, above that is the tensioner bracket, and on the bottom, a hose that goes from the oil cooler to the water pump. On the top is some easier items like a knock sensor, oil pressure switch, crankshaft position sensor, and the crankcase vent tube. Finally, time for the fun stuff. We can clean our head's mating surface one more time, put on the head gasket, and install our ARP head studs. Lube up the head stud threads and the washers to get a super accurate torque reading and torque them down in 3 increments of 30, 60, and 90 foot-pounds. Lube everything up and install the camshafts with the lobes facing up and RTV on the front cam cap. Next, install the camshaft seals on the front. Then for the valve cover, you just need RTV on any part where the elevation changes along with the rubber gasket. Back to the top of the engine, we can install the water pipes, the crankcase vent tubes, and the air pump valves and hardlines. Now we can get our long block in time. We just need to install the back timing covers, the tensioners, the idlers, and all 4 cam gears. This time I upgraded to the FIC cam gear bolt so I don't have to drill these out when I inevitably need to replace the cracked heads. And then we can lock down the right side cam gears before we get the timing belt on, and then we double and triple check that all the timing marks line up, pull the pin on the tensioner, remove the cam locking tools, and spin the crankshaft over 2 times to make sure all of the timing marks line up again. If so, you're good to go, and you can put on the cam gear covers and the plastic timing belt covers too, and then torque down the crank pulley. At this point, you have an assembled and timed EJ257 long block, and we can wrap it all up with spark plugs, coil packs, the intake manifold and all of the wiring, the AC bracket for a lift point, the up pipe and turbo, and lastly the engine mount and exhaust manifold on the bottom. And now we should be ready to put the engine back in the car. I got the chains on the engine, I got the hoist on the chains, I have the throwout bearing on the transmission, I got the car back on jack stands, I have a jack under the transmission to angle it correctly, and I even have all of my parts organized, ready to get put back on afterwards. So now what we need to do is lift up the engine, take it off the stand, then we can put our clutch on and torque that down in a star pattern to 16 Newton meters or 12 foot-pounds. Put the 2 bell housing studs back in the bottom of the engine, and then we just have to nicely meet the transmission and the engine back together, get the bell housing bolt started, and then get it back on the engine mount. From there, we can put our starter back on, making sure to get the ground strap, the power wire, and the signal wire back on. We can put our downpipe back on, our O2 sensor. There's 2 grounds on the bottom of the engine that go from the solenoids to the frame. Then we can put all of our IAG AOS hoses back on, plug in our engine harness, put our throttle body back on, and then our power steering pump, our AC compressor, our alternator, both of the accessory belts, the secondary air pump, the intercooler, the fuel lines, the vacuum lines, the intake, the battery, the radiator. Don't forget to plug in the fans, and then we can fill our oil and fill our coolant. Now a keen eye might notice that the intercooler's back off, and that's because I tried to pull a vacuum on our coolant system and I forgot our heater core hoses. So I had to take the intercooler back off to get our heater core hoses back on. So once I get the heater core hoses back on, I'm gonna pull a vacuum again just to make sure that they're sealed before I put everything back together again. All right, we're at negative 20 kPa, but we're dropping pretty quick here. So I have a leak somewhere. It sounds like it's from our heater core hoses still. Let me get those a little bit tighter. Okay, here's the deal. There is a coolant leak. I have tightened every hose clamp I can see and get to, and it's still leaking. I can hear it leaking from around the water pump area. So even though I know there's a leak somewhere, we're gonna fill it and we're gonna continue. That way when coolant actually starts dripping out, I can confirm where it's coming from. Very annoying, but that's just what it is. So we're gonna fill our coolant before we put our intercooler on, just in case it's such a big leak that it just starts dripping out immediately, and we'll go from there. Now, there's no point in vacuum filling this because there's no vacuum. So I'm just gonna go back old school again and just fill it from the top. All right, well, it's not actively dripping, which is either good or bad, I don't know anymore. So let's put our intercooler back on and start this thing up. All right, well, everything is back together. We have oil, we have coolant. We're technically ready for our first start of this car. I'm just a little less excited than normal because I know there's gonna be a coolant leak. So that kind of sucks. Maybe it'll seal itself, who knows? But let's, I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna hold down the gas pedal, push the button. Apparently that's supposed to shut off the fuel and let the engine crank over without starting it. I guess we're gonna find out if that's true or not. Okay, again, we don't want it to start. I'm gonna hold the gas pedal down, crank it over, build some oil pressure. All right, perfect. Holding down the gas pedal did in fact prevent it from starting. Now, let's start it. All right, sounds healthy. Engine build went well again. Okay, well now the car is misfiring. Didn't have any coolant leaking out yet. So I just reset all of our codes. I'm gonna go drive around, get the car up to temp to see if it starts leaking coolant. And I'm also gonna go drive it around to see if the misfire either goes away or throws a code. So I'll be back. Okay, here's the deal. Drove it 50 miles and we have coolant in the oil. I'm personally not surprised. After the teardown in the last video, we didn't see any evidence of why there would be coolant in the oil from anything I did with the engine build. Obviously, we had to rebuild it again after that. So that second engine build we needed to do because we tore it apart, but it was also a good way to verify to myself and both you guys that our first engine build wasn't full of a bunch of mistakes that would cause coolant ending up in your oil. So again, I was pretty sure that step 1, rebuild our engine a second time, was not going to end up fixing our issue. And that's why I already had steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 laid out. I was already pretty sure step 1 wasn't the issue. Also, if you remember, about 30 seconds ago, when I was vacuum checking the engine, we were losing pressure and we were losing a lot of it pretty quick. Now I know what you're thinking, why didn't you just do that the first time? And I did pressure test it the first time and it held around 10 PSI. Obviously I knew it still had a leak, it wouldn't hold 15 PSI, but I couldn't audibly hear where the leak was coming from. Whereas with this vacuum checker, I can put more pressure in it and I can audibly hear that leak coming from the left side cylinder head. So I know I told you guys that we were gonna do steps 2, 3, and 4, before we did step 5, but I think it's a little silly for me to do steps 2, 3, and 4 when I can hear the leak from the left side cylinder head, and the air oil separator, the turbo, and the oil cooler are all on the other side of the engine. They are not next to the left side cylinder head. The only thing next to the left side cylinder head is the left side cylinder head. I'm pretty convinced that our left side cylinder head is the issue. So we're skipping straight to step 5, and we have to diagnose our left side cylinder head. Have I said left side cylinder head enough for you guys yet? If not, here's one more: left side cylinder head. So I preemptively bought a used left side cylinder head to replace our left side cylinder head. However, I took it to the machine shop this morning, and their Subaru expert told me that there is 2 plugs inside of the left side cylinder head that could be causing the issue. So now the machine shop guy has got me second guessing on whether it's a crack or those 2 plugs. So before we tear this engine out, just to put a cylinder head on that we don't need, I'm going to drain the oil, drain the coolant, remove our battery, remove our secondary air pump, remove our coil packs, remove our spark plugs, and remove our valve cover. Bada boom! And there's our coolant oil. They're nice. All right, here's the deal. This could be a magical moment for the build here. I'm gonna pull vacuum on the cooling system, and I have a camera looking at those plugs in the head that I showed you on the head that I already bought. And this could save us like $700 to $800 if it's leaking from this one of these 2 plugs. All right, let's pull vacuum. Gotta hook up the air hose first. Now let's pull vacuum. Well, unfortunately, it was not those 2 plugs. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm convinced that we have a cracked head. Could be a cracked block. One of those 2. Current goal is to pull the engine again, pull the head off, and I'm going to take both the used head I just bought and the head that's already on the engine. They're gonna do their own pressure testing, vacuum checking first. Hopefully they can confirm that we have a crack. If they can't confirm it, the used head that I bought needs some work. The bottom is not level. You can see that here. I got a flat bar on it and it wobbles. You can see light in a couple places. The advertisement on eBay said it needs a valve job, but it turns out that the valves are just bent. That's not a valve job, people that I bought this from. A valve job is like cleaning them and lapping them, not just replacing all of the valves because they're bent. Anyway, if our head does have a crack, we're going to deck and clean the new head that I bought, as well as use the valves from this head because they're not bent, and that's gonna save us $160 in valves. So I can't even get the used head I bought to the machine shop until we take this head off, because we're gonna just make one good head from them. Again, if they pressure test it and there is a crack. It could still be that there's a crack in the block. That's why we're gonna pressure test the existing head first to verify. We did it again and again. This is the 3rd time we pulled this engine. It's getting really easy though, so that's pretty cool. Now we all know what's gonna happen from here. I need to pull the studs from the back and take off the clutch so we can put it on the engine stand. Now to get our left side cylinder head off, we just need to take off our intake manifold, all of the piping underneath the intake manifold, most of the timing on the front of the engine, and the exhaust manifold on the bottom. Now we actually still have a couple things to do while we wait for the machine shop to give us our good news that hopefully the head is cracked. Now I know that's backwards. Why would you want your head to be cracked? But of course at this point I just want the answer, and I've already spent the money on a used head so we can make one good one. So if they could just tell us our head is cracked, we could all have the answer, be happy, and move on. The two issues we have, we can hopefully fix for free. The first one being the rear left ABS wires somehow got cut while the car was sitting still outside. I'm guessing that the little bunny that's been living under there for a week or two decided to chew on some wires. Again, should be a quick and free fix. We simply need to take off our wheel, remove some sheathing to expose some bare wire, crimp the two wires back together, and heat shrink over that. Put a bigger piece of heat shrink over the top, and then I can even be triple safe and wrap that with electrical tape. The second warning light we had was for the secondary air pump system. One of the valves is stuck closed. Now that whole secondary air pump system really just blows unmetered air through the exhaust to trick the O2 sensors into thinking that they're not running rich during cold start. Most people who are modifying their Subaru delete the entire system and then use a tune to turn off the check engine lights. However, I'm not going to be doing that because cleaning the valve should be pretty easy and the rest of the system is working fine. Now there's two valves for the system, one for the left side and one for the right side. Only one of them was giving us an error. However, we're going to open up both of them, give them a good clean, just so we don't have to worry about the other one locking up later. Now just based off of how this one was so much more stuck than this one, I'm gonna guess that this one is our stuck one. It's actually super easy to test with two alligator clips and just your battery. We're gonna hook up one alligator clip to the left pin, which should be the positive, and the other alligator clip to the right pin, which should be negative. And now we should see this open. And it is not. And just to prove that we're doing that right, the other valve here has 5 pins. The extra 3 pins is for a barometric sensor that's built into this valve. So if your barometric sensor goes out, you have to replace the entire valve, which really increases the price tag of that barometric sensor. So let's test this one out. If we go positive and negative. So you can see this valve is opening and this valve is not. But again, regardless, I'm just gonna be cleaning both of them. And then again, we'll test both to make sure they're still operational. I'm just going to be cleaning them with brake clean and a brass brush. Maybe you don't need the brass brush. There is gasket in here. You don't really want to ruin the gasket. So maybe just some brake clean, wipe everything down, and make sure that you at least break the valve loose again so that it's operational. Alright, and after a cleaning, here is the one that was already opening before. Working super strong. And the other side, after cleaning, and I had to kind of help it open a couple times, is opening as well. I will say not quite as strong as the other side, but it does in fact open. And now that both valves are cleaned and operating, we can go ahead and reassemble. All right, here is the deal. It has been 2 weeks since you last saw me, and we finally got our head back from the machine shop. The machine shop pressure tested the head and they could not find a leak. However, I did have them make one good head out of the used one that I bought. There's no way I'm going back together with the same head just to have the same issue. So here is the head that originally came off of the engine, and here is our new head that has been cleaned, decked. We took the valves from our head. We took the camshafts from our head because they looked better. I think they also took some of the valve springs, some of the buckets. They just took all of the best parts from our original head and made one even better head. I'm also going to be using all of the original parts from my head, like the solenoids, the sensors. The used head I bought came with all of that, but I know mine are good and working, so I'm just going to be using those. And with all of that assembled, we should be ready to pull vacuum on our cooling system and see if we fixed our leak. We could still have a leak. It could be one of the hoses I just put on. So if we pull vacuum and I double check all my hoses and we still hear that left side cylinder head leaking, it means it wasn't the left side cylinder head and we have an even bigger issue. I don't know how many times I've said this in this video, but pray to the car gods. I have spent so much money and so much time on this Subaru and I just want to enjoy it. So let's pull vacuum and let's see what we got. Okay, it's dropping, but it's dropping way slower and I don't hear it, but we have a leak. Let me find the leak. We are officially holding vacuum. Now, it's time for me to be honest with you. The machine shop tested the head and the machine shop found the crack. I just didn't want to tell you guys until we vacuum tested the entire system and we had no more issues. So it's time to reassemble the rest of the Subaru and time to finally enjoy it. It should be super quick from here. We put on our fuel lines, we put on our vacuum lines, we put on our AC compressor, we put on our alternator, the intercooler, the battery, the intake, fill our oil, fill our coolant. Third first start, coolant's still going, but we're just gonna start it. That can drain while it heats up. Hopefully this sounds okay. It may not be setting any speed records, but the sounds this thing makes are perfect. Even though I've had to pull, disassemble, and rebuild this engine 3 times in 700 miles, hard to hate it. It's fun, sounds good. It's like the perfect manual all-wheel drive daily winter car. We are at 107 miles on our 3rd rebuild. Oil level's good, coolant level's good, 0 check engine lights, which means that I finally get to enjoy this thing. A little bit of deja vu. Obviously, we've been here before, episode 4 when we went for our actual first drive, but that was very short-lived. I slowly watched all of my coolant drain out and my oil level rise until I finally put 2 and 2 together that we had an issue. I hope you guys learned something from this series, because I sure did. For one, if you buy a car and it has an engine failure, and at the same time, the radiator is empty, maybe they're related. Maybe you should pressure test all of your engine components, because maybe there's a reason why the coolant is empty and it has a spun bearing. Another thing is, if you guys thought that this build was crazy, pulling, disassembling, and rebuilding an engine 3 times in 700 miles, you should check out the GR Super build that I'm working on, because the level of difficulty and the level of insanity trumps this in every single way. Frame repair's done, chassis painted, all of the wiring's done. We just get to put it together and hopefully next video, maybe go for that first drive. On that note, I appreciate each and every single one of you. Like, comment, and subscribe, because it helps me more than you know, and I hope to see you in the next one. Now, one more time for just for fun. God, and the turbo noises. Don't pass up the turbo noises. That's just... All right, one more for the road home. And now, on that note, I'll see you in the next one.